Hi there, today I'm going to be walking through our new attribution setup in Marketo that we've built to deal with issues of merges interrupting our previous attribution programs. So where everything starts off is the attribution master smart campaign, and it triggers as soon as someone is created. And then the first thing it does is it waits 2 minutes because this is often when the merge event typically happens. So we wait for the merge to happen. After that happens, then we start trying to assign a person's attribution. And then each in turn, we're going to call other submaster executable campaigns. One's for paid attribution, which will go through all our paid attribution campaigns to see if we can assign any first touch attribution to these paid campaigns. We've got ones for social, referral, search, and so on. The order of these is important, and the reason we've got paid attribution at the very top is because we want all leads who've come through a paid channel to get priority. For example, because if they come through a paid channel and then come to us later on through an organic Google search, then we want the paid attribution to get priority over the organic Google search. So that's why paid attribution is far above search attribution here. And then since this generated attribution submaster also relies on query strings, we're going to put it after paid attribution. And some of the social attribution campaigns also use query string parameters, so we're going to put that here. And then the referral and search don't rely on query string parameters, but only rely on the referrer of the web page visit. So that's why we put them last. And then other attribution and form attribution are two kind of fallbacks for when we don't find anyone with any web page visits that we can assign their attribution to. And I'll go through some of these later on. If the person makes it through all 7 of these executable campaigns and hasn't yet had their person source or lead source details set, then we're going to set them to direct unknown. And later on, every month at the start of the month on the first day, we're going to take a look at all these direct unknown people and see, is there a channel we're missing attribution on that we could reduce the number of direct people? And if so, we'll incorporate that into this kind of mechanism here. So I'll show you what one of these submasters looks like. I'll show you the paid attribution master first. So there's nothing special about this. It's just an executable campaign. And the important distinguishing feature of an executable campaign is that the first executable campaign must complete before the second one starts, and so on. So this completes first. Once this is complete, the second one runs, then the third one runs, and so on. And that's important because we don't want all of these running in parallel, or else it could just mess up the attribution. So we want one to complete and then the next. And this calls all the paid campaigns that are live in the current month in order. And again, the order here matters. So we typically get a lot of high volume from like Google search, whereas someone could come in from a display campaign, visit our website, and then come back in through a paid search campaign. So we want to give digital advertising priority, so that's at the top. And what we could also do is we could also prioritize EMEA campaigns above US campaigns, because a similar thing could happen. Someone visits our site through an EMEA campaign, then Googles us later on, sees an ad that actually happens to be a US ad, and then comes in through the US ad. And since EMEA is a growing region, we want to give as much credit there as possible. So we could rank all these EMEA campaigns above all the US ones. And then we do the same for Quora, Twitter, Bing. We put those all above paid search Google. And I'll show you what a typical set attribution campaign looks like. So this just checks before the person was created. So remember, the flow is the person is created, we wait 2 minutes, and then we check all these attribution campaigns. We check to see, have they visited any web page before they were created that contains these parameters? And if yes, then we're going to set all their first touch parameters. We change their status to visited in this campaign. We change their last touch field to be the query string parameters that they came in with. And then we update all the rest of their first touch fields. And then I'll just show an example of another submaster. So in this example here for Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, we rely on query string parameters in all of our posts on these social media platforms. So if they visit our site, they'll have UTM parameters that we can track. So that's why we put these three above Instagram, Quora, Reddit, and YouTube, where they just rely on the referrer in the visit web page constraint. And then the set attribution for these campaigns that don't rely on query string parameters is slightly different. So as I mentioned before, we look at the referrer constraint and we say that we know the query string does not contain any parameters from, paid campaigns or organic social campaigns that we want to track. And then the referrer contains something like Google, or it's Bing, or it's Instagram, or it's Quora. And that's how we associate them as being referred from these channels. The next campaign I'm going to go through is the generated master. And here we check a number of smart lists, and if the person is a member of any of these smart lists, then they're going to get their person source and their lead source detail assigned appropriately. So an example of this is, let's say, a business ops signature, and that is here. If they're a member of this smart list, then they're going to get their attribution set correctly. And then this other attribution, I'll explain this person source later on and why we have this here, but we don't have it in other campaigns. We could actually have it in social attribution, but we can't have it in paid attribution, and I'll tell you why in a second. I'm just going to make a note of that. Okay. And then for other attribution, I'll just show you where this comes in the ranking, again, just for context's sake. So we go through paid, we go through the generated attribution, social, referral, search, and then we go through other attribution and then form attribution. So the other attribution, once again, relies on smart lists to assign a person's person source and lead source detail. So for example, if we know they were created by Salesforce and they're a member of this smart list, we're going to give them the person source of sales generated and lead source detail of prospecting. And then another interesting campaign here is the referrer campaign. So since we know that once the attribution master campaign has reached this other attribution submaster, we know it's already gone through all the organic referral and organic search campaigns that rely on the referrer constraint. So if someone reaches this point in this smart list and they visit a web page and the referrer is not empty and the referrer not contains some other crap that we don't want to track, that means that they've got a referrer that we haven't tracked in any of our organic social, organic referral, or organic search campaigns. So in this scenario, we're going to set their lead source we're going to set their person source to referral and their lead source detail to unknown. And then again, at the first of the month, we'll do a review and we'll see all the people who've got referral unknown. We'll dig into their activity logs and then we'll try and find who was the referrer that referred them. And if it's a high volume of this occurring, then we can look to include that referrer in our organic social search or organic referral, social, or search campaigns. Okay, and then up next, the very last one to show you is the very last submaster that gets called, and that's form attribution. And that's actually stored in our web folder and then the form attribution master. And once it's reached this campaign, it's gone through all the previous 6 and it's the very last one to run. And what it's responsible for doing is it's responsible for identifying. So when it reaches this point, we don't know what first touch brought the person in. So in this case, we're going to set everyone's person source equal to direct, but then we want a bit more context on what form on our website created them, and we're going to put this in the lead source detail. So we checked if they filled out all these forms, and then if they did, we're going to populate a certain value in their lead source detail. The only exception that doesn't follow this filled out form rule is a SIP and SMS rate deck, and that's because the same form is used on different web pages. So we need these smart lists to distinguish what web page the form was filled out on to tell us whether it was a SIP or SMS rate deck that was requested. And that's how the form attribution works. And the important thing to note here is if there's any new forms that we create, whether it's for an event like Enterprise Connect 2022, a new webinar, or a product pre-launch page, they all need to be added to this flow so that if we don't find the real reason someone came to our site, we can at least give them a direct person source and populate the lead source detail with the form that they were created with. And an important thing to note here is that once a form is no longer being used, like the Enterprise Connect 2022 form, this will no longer be relevant in a month's time. So we should then remove that from this flow here. And finally, I'm going to get into some exceptions. Another oddity I want to go through is with leads who are created by LinkedIn or Facebook lead gen forms. When they're created via Facebook or LinkedIn lead gen form, they're created by the web service API and their person source is LinkedIn lead gen or Facebook lead gen. So that means that their person source is not empty when they're created, which is completely different to every other new person that's created in Marketo who have an empty person source when they're created. So we need to account for this in our campaigns. So I'll first show you what a non-lead gen campaign looks like, so you can see the difference when I go to the lead gen campaign. Here, when the person is created, we know their person source will be empty. And if it's not empty, that means it was populated by another campaign, so it won't go in here. However, for people who are created by LinkedIn, they'll already have a person source populated, but we still want them to go through this campaign. So what we say is, if their person source is LinkedIn lead gen, then do nothing. Choice 2 won't be activated, so it won't go through choice 2, and then it'll go straight here, and then it'll get all the first touch parameters. However, if it's not LinkedIn lead gen, it then goes to choice 2, evaluates choice 2. If it's empty, it'll go through these subsequent steps. If it's not empty, it will be removed from this campaign. So this is a small nuance we have to take into account for our LinkedIn lead gen campaigns, and we'll have to do something similar for Facebook lead gen campaigns once we start using those again. And the reason, so as I mentioned, LinkedIn lead gen people are created with a person source, and we need these LinkedIn people to come through this set attribution smart campaign, and this gets called by the paid attribution master. So this is why we can't put a person source is empty filter here for the paid attribution master, because we still need to come through this flow. So we go to the correct LinkedIn campaign and get the first touch parameters set correctly. However, for all of these other submasters, like other attribution or generated attribution, we can set person source is empty as a condition here, because if it's not empty, then there's no need to go through the rest of these flows. Sorry, I'm just trying to, and I've made a note of this in here. So we can't put a person source empty filter here either, because we need to come through this attribution master to get to the paid attribution submaster. And I've also made a note that we could add the member of global exclusion list to this smart list. So then we don't need the global exclusion smart list condition or filter in all the subsequent SFTC set attribution campaigns. So we could remove this filter from all these SFTC attribution campaigns and then put it in the attribution master campaign instead. So that's another optimization that could be made in future. But for now, that's everything I have to cover on this.